Hi everyone, Bakhtawer here. I talk about books here on this channel. If that's something that you're interested in, consider subscribing. Today, I have a very interesting topic for you. Wait, I'm still wearing my mask because I'm coming back from somewhere, but then I didn't feel like taking it off because it's got the pearls and I love stuff like that, pretty stuff. And you should do stuff that makes you happy and without worrying what anyone thinks, because a lot of people might find you silly, but you have to kind of let that slide. So anyway, forget about what I just said. Anyway, I have a bit of a different video for you. So I read Educated, which everybody has read and everybody is apparently crazy about since the last 2 years. So the question arises in the reader's mind, is this really the most profound anti-sob story of social mobility and triumph in the face of poverty, insanity, and ignorance? Or is this just another one of those memoirs that try to sell you a prolonged tragedy or travesty of sorts and hope that you believe every aspect of it? So we'll discuss that in this video. So first off, when I started reading this book, it was not as impressive to me as I imagine it has been to many of my counterparts who also review books, and also just generally what I've heard. So Educated is a memoir of sorts. It's sort of not really written in a linear fashion, sort of linear, but she kind of dips in and out of different events that happened in her childhood. And she grew up in the mountains of Idaho with her really odd family, and apparently her parents didn't believe in public school or regular medical care or sort of doing anything that an institution might be behind. And her father might actually be bipolar, according to her. And her parents believed in something called the Y2K apocalypse, which apparently a lot of people believed in which they thought that the year 2000 would signal the end of the world. Needless to say, they were wrong. So she basically spends most of her childhood working in a junkyard that her father owns, I believe, or operates out of. And she never has any access to books. She never has any formal education. She has a sort of homeschooling in which there's actually no homeschooling involved. So there's the sort of setting for your narrative, if you like. And also, among other things, she's never used like regular allopathic medicine, not even like painkillers or anything, which really struck me because she sort of describes this sort of thing in which she says that pain is sort of almost sacred, and that's what she was taught, and that you just bear it. And her mother, who is a self-professed, kind of self-proclaimed homeopath of sorts, just makes these kind of tinctures and these essential oils and stuff, and apparently that's the cure for everything from like a sawed-off arm to an infection. So she's never used antibiotics. I think the first time that she uses antibiotics is actually when she's like in her mid-20s or something, which is crazy. She has a sort of dysfunctional childhood, as she describes. Like, there's a lot of, I believe, verbal and physical abuse. Her brother seems to be more abusive than her father, but her parents, they never hit her or anything like that. It's I think more emotional in nature. Of course, sort of the deprivation and isolation of living in an area like that without any access to the outside world. So yeah, I imagine it would stunt a child's growth, although it didn't really stunt hers, given that she goes on to study in Cambridge. So I know that this sort of being homeschooled and not having been given an access to proper public school or what have you is kind of marketed as a kind of tragedy, which I imagine it must be. But the part of the world where I live in, being educated is actually, it's more the exception rather than the norm. So you have, 50-60% of the population, they're mostly illiterate. So I believe that this is more like, it seems like a first world tragedy to me. So it would seem kind of myopic, which of course one can excuse given that this is a memoir and someone's personal experience. But yeah, most of the problems that she goes through, they seem very medical in nature, no access to antibiotics. Her mother's always making tinctures. She never goes to the hospital for anything, even basic things like x-rays. And don't get me wrong, I mean, I rely on natural things for, like I take a lot of natural supplements and I believe in natural medication, but at some point you have to pop a painkiller, you have to take an antibiotic, you have to get an x-ray done. I mean, at some point you can't just be, it's not 100% absolute thing. You have to find like a sort of balance, in which you're still living in the real world and you're not, I don't know, taking essential oils to deal with like a full-blown infection or something like that. So I really liked the tone of the expression is really wonderful. Of course, the part that I found really difficult to believe in a way is that she's had no formal education, she's had no schooling, and then suddenly she is able to, almost with an excellent score, she's able to, give her high school diploma, and then she's able to get into a university, and then she's able to get into Cambridge. I mean, is this all too good to be true or something like that? Because I'm pretty sure that people who go to private schools and have the best possible education have a hard enough time doing any of those things. So having like no education and simply jumping to all of that, I mean, seems like a bit of a stretch. And it didn't seem altogether that convincing to me. But maybe there's something that I'm missing out. When I was reading this memoir, I will say that I refrained from doing a lot of external research, as I usually do in my videos. I didn't watch any interviews or anything like that because I wanted to see how much substance the book held on its own, without me actually undergoing the research into the writer's life to ascertain the effect of certain things. So on the basis of the book itself, it didn't seem as convincing to me, even for someone who might be a genius. And she seems to, and I'm getting ahead of myself, but I'm going to explain, like she seems to repeatedly make the same mistakes. She has a really hard time classifying abuse as abuse. So she's clearly not a genius, right? But so there's a lot of stuff that doesn't add up, and I don't know if other readers felt like that, but I visited some forums and I read what other people were discussing and everything, and it seemed like a lot of the events seemed implausible to a lot of people other than me, so it's not just me. However, what I really liked about the tone of the book is that it's written in a very original kind of style. There's a lot of childlike fascination. It's not really written as a sob story or she wants somebody to feel sorry for her. There's a lot of rich, beautiful expression and imagery and metaphors. So it makes for an enjoyable read, at least till halfway, because after that it becomes a little repetitive, which I will get into later. So apart from the more problematic aspects, which I will elaborate on, it is in some ways an enjoyable read, and it's not like a pity party, so you don't really get tired of the tone. But after halfway, I'm going to tell you what happens. You know how in TV they're like, after the break, we're going to tell you what happens. Please bear in mind that none of the stuff I say is actually meant to be a criticism. It's just, most of the time, it's my experience as a reader. You don't have to agree with it. Nobody has to agree with it. And it's not, I may dislike a book which somebody else might like. So this is not a criticism by any leap of the imagination. Also, when she gets into Cambridge, she keeps getting grant over grant, which, deals with all of the fees she has to pay and a lot of other things, and she has money left over. And it's really amazing. So either this is like the most amazing story of social mobility that I've come across in a long time, because social mobility is a topic that really interests me on a personal level, because I read a lot about it when I was doing my degree, and so it's something that I'm interested in, and I've read a lot about the more economic aspects of it and the theories. So of course it doesn't add up to me of how either she has the most phenomenal luck imaginable, or maybe I feel like she should have given more detail. And coming back now finally to the title of the educated is not really, it's not even about education. She throws in a few definitions here and then. You finish the book, you don't feel like she's gone through the kind of transformation that I was really looking forward to reading about when I purchased this book. So that was a sort of disappointment. She keeps, after halfway, the reader is like, why do you keep going back if your family is so toxic? Why do you keep going back home and subjecting yourself to it? And she makes these really foolish mistakes, which I think even the more dumber of us wouldn't make. And she keeps returning to a setup that is clearly no good for her and is clearly bad for her mental health. And she keeps returning to it to relive the trauma. And there's a lot of repetitiveness. In every chapter, she's like, I'm going back home now. And you're like, why? Why are you going back home? And again, it's like, she lives in a country where it's acceptable to just leave your parents' home and start a new life, one that's, not as difficult and horrible, right? Because, again, my part of the world, you actually don't have that option. If somebody is unlucky enough to have a toxic family, they have to live with that family till the day they die, because there's a lot of societal taboo around people moving away or getting their own place to live, especially if they're not married. So it's like she has all of this ease, and what does she do with it, right? So that's very irritating and also troubling. Like, she gets all of this, again, exposure to excellent civilization and Gothic cathedrals and beautiful places and so many books, and she's still doing what she would have done when she was a kid. It's like she's learned literally nothing, and you don't even get a sense of the education that she has, because there's not enough about it. It's mostly, there's some part in which you feel like maybe she's regaining some esteem or whatever, but then the next thing she does is like, you're like, oh no, false alarm, false alarm. She's not regained any real self-esteem. So there is that. So yeah, I picked this book up because I wanted to be blown away. I really bought into the marketing. Again, I'm a stickler for social mobility and stories of extraordinary triumph, people against horrifying circumstances and how they come out of that. I mean, I'm somebody, like, I'm like the perfect person to sell this kind of book to. And even if I'm not convinced, I don't know how somebody's supposed to sell this to like regular people, because I'm somebody who loves these kind of books. I mean, I love stories of triumph. I love all of that. I didn't have any esteem and now I have a bunch of it. I mean, I really buy that stuff, and I couldn't bring myself to have that opinion about this book. So yeah, please share your opinion if you had a different one, if you had a different experience, or if there's something that maybe, you've done some other research or watched an interview and you've changed your mind, sort of. So let me know if that plays any part in it. But the book on its own standing doesn't do that for me. And then, yeah, she puts in a lot of praise of how her professors, apparently after teaching for 40 years, they're just like, oh, you're solid gold, woman. And they're having all of these praise, but it's never really explained what makes them do that, or the reader just feels like, the reader doesn't feel convinced. Like, she doesn't specify in full what she's even studying or what she's even learned or what bit of research really elevated her in her professor's eyes. So I believe that there's a lot of things that a good editor would have picked up, I'm imagining. But yeah, so give it a read if you want. But yeah, I just wanted to put this cosmic question out there. Is educated even about education? And I didn't think that it was. And I don't think that it's about that other kind of the emotional intelligence or emotional education bit of it either, because again, I didn't feel like the character completed an arc. I didn't feel like the character was transformed. I definitely wasn't transformed. And so it's not even like a coming of age kind of effect. It fails on all the things that it sets out to do. So yeah, that's just my take on it. And yeah, if you've read it, please leave your comments below, and I'll be joining you soon with other content. And also more along the lines of doing stuff that makes you happy and seems silly to other people. I've been on a buying spree of these duck post-it notes. They're beautiful. I've been using them when I read books, to kind of just stick in between the book, because it's too much of a hassle to keep separate notebooks and stuff. So I've been doing that, and they're just so cute. And I've got so many of them now, and I bought them from my grocery store, which I think my grocery store is ahead of its time, because it just seems to have everything that you want. And yeah, it's an amazing grocery store. I'm very unduly attached to it. It's sort of my happy place, if that makes any sense. So yeah, see you next time. Goodbye, and lots of love to you all.